do three things today. First, I'm going to just share a little bit of my own story on how I came to be here, and I guess how first 100% and then Solar Citizens came into being. That's at the request of the organisers. I'm going to share the story of a successful campaign on renewable energy that was run a few years ago, and I think we've heard from Claire, David and Jess's presentations that political will and people power, ensuring that we have growing political will to tackle some of these issues is one of the biggest issues that we're dealing with here, and this campaign that I want to talk to speaks to the importance of people power and building political will. And finally, I just want to touch quickly on what I think the opportunity that Solar Citizens has in terms of growing the people power movement at the moment. Okay, so this picture behind me is kind of where it all started for me. I was, back in 2006, working as an academic in the geography department at Sydney Uni, planning to do a PhD, and just sort of getting my head around the climate issue when Al Gore's film came out, and we heard David mention that, and that kind of turned my life around. I walked out of the Dendy Theatre in Newtown where I lived and thought, shit, I've got to do something about this. And myself and some friends ended up setting up a little climate action group in our local area to see what we could do about the issue. And we started out like lots of little groups like that, trying to promote sort of local solutions, encourage people to change light bulbs, ride bikes, and so on. But it wasn't long into my sort of journey in the climate action space that I realised that the issues that we were trying to address were so much bigger than what we could possibly do locally, and they needed political solutions. And I guess that was really brought home to me in a moment that I had in a meeting with my local Member of Parliament, Anthony Albanese, who at the time was the Minister for Infrastructure. And some of you will have heard me tell this story before. I've told it many times. I'm going to tell it again at the organisers' request, because I think it does speak to what we're trying to do here today. So we went into this meeting with Anthony Albanese wanting to understand why the government was not doing more on climate change. He and Kevin Rudd had just been elected and had announced that they were going to introduce a 5% emissions reduction target. And for us, we knew the challenge of the climate science and the climate problem, and couldn't understand why the ambition was so low. And we went into this meeting and said to him, do you understand the climate science? Because if you do, how could you possibly commit to such a low target? And he looked back at us and he said, yes, I absolutely understand the scale of the problem that we're facing. And I know people here in my inner city Sydney electorate care about it. But until I have people on street corners in every community that I travel to around the country telling me that they want me to do more, I'm not going to be able to do more. We can't be more ambitious. I actually walked out of that meeting with tears running down my face. To me, that was a huge failure of leadership. But it was also a lesson in the reality of the politics that we're dealing with, where we've got huge entrenched interests working against emissions pollution cuts, and a community who needs to get organised and needs to get powerful and needs to force our government to do more if they're going to do more. And so that was part of my particular story and what led to the establishment of the 100% Renewable Campaign. At the same time, there were local little climate action and environment groups popping up all around the country. How many people here were involved with a climate group, or perhaps with a 100% Renewable Campaign? So maybe half a dozen or a dozen. So I got together with a bunch of people from all around the country to put together an organisation that could do what Albo said needed to happen, that could be organised with shared goals to get out on the streets and pressure our government to do more. And so I'm just going to flick through a few slides from the establishment of that 100% Renewable Campaign. There was about 60 or 70 communities all around the country who got out and took photos like this at town or suburb signs. That launched in May 2011, I think it was. And it was only later that year that we had a federal election. The campaign was still getting off the ground. that federal election where there was the hung parliament, and in the end, Julia Gillard was victorious in forming government, and that was actually a really critical moment, as many of you will know, for the climate movement, because the Greens and the independents who decided to join with her to form government made it a condition of their support that the government introduced a carbon price. So what I'm moving into now is the story of about a 3-month period when the government was negotiating over what that carbon price would look like, and the role of people-powered campaigning in forcing an outcome for renewables. Because I'm not sure if many of you know, but when the carbon price was first being floated or discussed, there was a potential that none of the money raised from the price, none of that revenue would actually be invested back into renewable energy whatsoever. It was going to go to householders in terms of compensation. It was going to go back to the polluters in terms of compensation, but we weren't going to use any of that money to actually transition towards the energy future we knew was required. So we got out and got organised. These are some photos of a whole series of trainings we ran around the country, events like this that got people active and ready for action, including these pictures of doing a whole bunch of community surveying and door knocking around the country. So we decided to do a survey to ask people whether they thought the carbon price should include money for renewable energy, or the carbon price package, and took that to the streets and to doors all over the place. I'm just flicking through some of the pictures here. These are from states all around Australia. And then we ended up having 14,000 face-to-face conversations. And with each of those conversations, we signed people up to our supporter list and took the results of the survey that we ran and put them into this national report, What Australians Are Saying About Renewable Energy. Those reports were also generated at the local level. So we had a national one, but every local group put their survey results together as well. The surveys were published in local media all around the country, so that's North Sydney, Sutherland, Armidale, that's over in Bunbury in WA, Ballarat. And then the results were taken to politicians, to local members. And this was all during, there was a very quiet period where the government and the independents and the Greens were locked in silent negotiations, and we didn't know what was going on, but we kept getting these sort of messages, particularly from the Greens and the independents, saying, you know, what you're doing is helpful, keep going, we need to hear from you more. So the reports were taken to ministers and shadow ministers. So you'll see some familiar faces in here. And a series of public forums were also run. This was in Tony Windsor's electorate, where we asked the crowd in a packed hall how important it is to you that your elected MP is a strong advocate for renewable energy. And Tony Windsor sat on the stage and watched as the whole crowd stood up and said, we want you to take our voice to Parliament House on this. And Rob Oakeshott was hearing similarly from people in his electorate. So these are some photos from an event we ran at Parliament House when we handed over that survey. And finally, the local groups all around the country got out and did flyering and other activities, putting the pressure on in the last moment. We had a series of call-in days when we knew that the government was locked in negotiations, where we bombarded their phones with messages and texts. And at the end of all of that, Julia Gillard got up and announced the Clean Energy Future Package, which contained the $3 billion, figures have slipped from my mind, Australian Renewable Energy Agency, the formation of that agency, and the Clean Energy Finance Corporation as a new body that would invest in solar and wind and energy efficiency and other technologies. So that was a huge victory from our perspective, a huge victory for the literally hundreds of people who'd gone out all around the country and had conversations in their community and taken the results of those conversations to MPs and said, this is the voice of the people, you need to see it reflected in this package. And we can see the results of that today is that, you know, the Clean Energy Finance Corporation and ARENA, although there have been significant attempts to sort of wind them back and diminish their potential, are still going and are still doing valuable work. So, I think there were just a few lessons from that I wanted to share. One is to use moments well. I think we were successful because there was that negotiation happening. The pressure was on. People were motivated to see an outcome and got active. Pick your targets. We were really careful about, while we did sort of nationwide surveying, we really intensified activity in the electorates of those key MPs, the independents and government ministers. And the third lesson, that politicians are influenced by real people and by people in their electorates. So this brings me to the final thing I wanted to share about solar citizens, real people in real electorates. While all those debates around the carbon price were going on, we were also seeing the rise of solar that we've just heard Jess and Claire talk about, as well as that sort of solar coaster of policy changes going on. And what that presented, I guess, for those of us who were observing it, was an opportunity and a challenge. The challenge was, you know, the challenge of some of the things that Jess was talking about, really regressive moves around feed-in tariffs, around the renewable energy target, attempts to wind that back around the networks. But real opportunities in this now 1.5 million people who had a direct investment, a personal interest in the energy system that we, you know, were campaigning for to change. And so there's some of the people here in the room today. There was quite a sort of extensive process for us in deciding to actually shift away from the 100% campaign and set up Solar Citizens. And anyone who's interested, I can tell you more about that. But that decision was made back in 2010. And very quickly started getting runs on the board. And I think Claire has talked about some of the successes of Solar Citizens already in fighting against some of the really aggressive moves we've seen. But here's a couple more pictures that speak to that. The very rapid reversal of an attempt by the WA government to massively slash the feed-in tariff for, I think, 70,000 families. And similar attempts in Queensland. People got pretty angry and pretty active pretty fast around those issues and forced a really rapid back down. So angry solar citizens can be powerful. Finally, I think just to speak to those numbers a bit further, I wanted to put up this wall of numbers. I'm going to talk you through it. I hate it when people put up charts that are totally incomprehensible. But this is actually the raw data that from some of the electorate data that we've crunched on the number of solar homes by electorate around the country. And this really speaks to the potential of solar citizens to have electoral impact. I'm going to just pick one electorate. I understand that Claire and others are going to be talking about electorates that people are going to be working in and the top solar electorates later this weekend. I'm just going to pick this one of Petrie here out of Brisbane to show you the potential impact that solar voters can have. So Petrie sits on a margin of 0.5%. So it's a very, very marginal electorate. And possibly one you wouldn't target because I imagine the government would be expecting that it would sway anyway. But 0.5% means for the seat to change hands at the next election, only 465 votes need to change. In that electorate, there are 14,000, a bit over 14,000 solar homes. This number, this is old data, so this will have gone up. Which means potentially, assuming about 2 voters per home, could be about 28,000 voters that own solar. Which means equates to about 20% of homes in the electorate that are solar homeowners. And that means you'd actually, in order to switch the electorate, only need to reach and convince 1.6% of solar voters. So this is an extreme example. But there are, you know, probably 25 or so, maybe more electorates like this around the country where solar voters alone could change the outcome of the election if we made it a major issue in that electorate. So I guess that's what our challenge is here this weekend. We've got power in our numbers. There's an election coming up. We can push Turnbull to make important new commitments around renewable energy, around solar homeowners' interests. But we need to reach our people and build our numbers. We need to elevate the issue in the public domain in the electorates that matter. And we need to pressure those MPs to in turn pressure Cabinet and our Prime Minister. We know it can be done. We did it in 2012 and with other campaigns since. We need to get out in the streets. We need to sign people up. We need to get in the local media. We need to meet with our pollies. That's why this weekend is so exciting. It's why it's so exciting that you're all here. There's really important work to do this year ahead. I wish you all the very best for it. Thank you.